You know, the most outdated idea there is to go to school, find a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest long-term in the stock market. The question would be, why save money when we're printing trillions of dollars? Because the reality is that the gap between the 1% and the 99% is huge. You see, it's not just a matter of money. You have to step back and look at the situation as a whole. So, what to do? You have to understand that there is a poor person inside each of us. There's always a poor person in me. There's also a middle-class person, and this person, out of a desire for security, wants a regular salary. And there's a rich person, and they are all inside you and me, except no one teaches us this at school. They teach you to go to school, find a job, and earn a salary, but they don't teach you how to become rich. If you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you definitely know that my rich dad refused to pay me. He told me that a paycheck was one of the most humiliating things you could accept in your life. That day, he told me that the moment you receive a paycheck, you're an employee, and that's the mindset. My rich dad never paid me. This drove my poor dad, who was a civil servant, crazy. He said you have to pay people. And my rich dad didn't say that a salary was bad. He just didn't want to be a slave to money. So, as an entrepreneur, I just have to create another business. In fact, I don't need a salary. I don't need anyone to take care of me. And if my government doesn't like me, I move to another country because they need entrepreneurs. The entrepreneur is not so much the business itself, but rather the mentality and mindset that drive it. Being an entrepreneur is really about the mindset, skills, and different rules. You see, small businesses don't operate according to the same rules as big businesses. Entrepreneurship is primarily a mindset, a set of skills and rules. And depending on whether you're an employee or a small business, the rules are different, the mindsets are different, the skills are different. If I could say one thing to someone who has never been an entrepreneur and is considering it, well, I would tell them what happened to me. You know, I still remember very clearly my last paycheck, the worst and best days of my life. I was in Puerto Rico working for Xerox, and my boss gave me my last check. It wasn't a salary, it was a bonus. I think it was about $30,000, but that wasn't the net salary, and that's the problem with it. I remember I was so excited, but I was also disturbed. Another guy, a guy who worked with me, came up to me. His name was John, and John told me, "You're going to come back." I asked him why, and he replied, "Because you understand why he said that." I was going to fail, in fact. I understood why he said that because that's what he did. He left Xerox, tried to start a business, failed, and then he came back. So I told him, "You failed and you came back, but I will fail and I will never come back." And that's the attitude. You see what I mean? If you say that if I fail, I'll go back to mom and dad, that's what you'll do. So that's how I became an entrepreneur, because I had no money. I didn't have money for years. I had absolutely no salary. But that's what my rich father encouraged me to do. He told me that when you don't have a salary, you become hungrier, smarter, and it's a test for your character. Will you become a crook? Will you become dishonest? Will you cheat and steal? Or will you become a better human being? You know, the advantage of becoming an entrepreneur is that you really find out what it's about, because you start with nothing, and you can always lose everything. That's why you should always have an overview. Too many people wonder what's going to happen to them. But when you look at the situation as a whole, you also know that when something bad happens, something good will happen. So you need to be prepared for whatever comes. If you think the next 20 years will be like the last 20, you're going to get crushed. So when you and I go to the supermarket to buy a carton of milk, we always check the expiration date, always. But most people don't check the expiration date of their brain. That's why instead of getting out of debt, I go into debt. For instance, I've just refinanced $300 million of debt, going from an interest rate of 5% to 2.5%. And guess what? I've made a fortune. Every month I have more money because the cost of money has decreased. Some financial experts say you should get out of debt. I say you need to learn how to use debt. When I returned from Vietnam in January 1973, the first thing my rich dad told me was to go to school to learn how to invest in real estate. But it wasn't really real estate he was talking about. It was about how to use debt and taxes. DT, taxes. They make the rich richer and the poor and the middle class poorer. So all the rich people who are doctors, lawyers, or whatever, they're getting ripped off and they don't know why. Oh yes, they might be earning more money, but the salary was less. You know, a few days ago my doctor was screaming at me because he was happy. Guess what he was telling me? He finally made $1 million. And I said, yeah, that's great. But how much do you pay in taxes? He told me $750,000. So his net income was about $400,000, which isn't bad, but I have more control over my income. When I earn $1 million, I keep $1 million. The reason is that I don't earn by working for money. If you work for money, you're taxed. That's why lesson number 1 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is that the rich don't work for money. What we do, on the other hand, is create businesses. As an entrepreneur, acquire real estate and not invest in the stock market as an employee. As an entrepreneur, I have more control over my income, over what I earn, over the taxes I pay. And since I am both an entrepreneur and a real estate investor, I don't pay taxes. So, every time I earn, say, $1 million as an entrepreneur, I immediately invest in real estate. I get a 4-point lead. So I invest $1 million in real estate, and the bank gives me $4 million. That's why I love banks, but banks scam everyone. It's terrible, but it's good for me. And you know, when money is printed, savers are losers, and people who work for money are even more so. But debtors get richer. You see, debt and taxes make the rich richer, and the poor and the middle class poorer. In fact, when we cling to outdated ideas, we get outdated results. For most people, the idea of going to school, finding a job, working hard, saving money, getting out of debt, buying a house because it's an asset, and investing long-term has become obsolete. This idea is outdated and makes many people poor because the world has changed. It changed in 1971 when President Nixon took us off the gold standard and money became debt. Am I saying that we should not have an educational system at all? No. I'm saying that education was more important in the past but has become obsolete. You know, there's Moore's Law, which states that information doubles every 18 months. In other words, everything becomes obsolete every 18 months. So when you graduate, you're already outdated. That's why I'm the old one, because I meet friends who tell me, I went to Harvard. Yeah, how long ago was that? 50 years ago? It makes no sense because today banks charge you interest to save money. In other words, they don't want your money because they've printed too much of it. And that's why there are stock bubbles in real estate and everything else. People are getting rid of their money because, as I said here, savers are losers and cash is trash. And yet people say, I want a high-paying job. That's an outdated idea. So is getting out of debt. We need to learn to get into debt to get rich, and they will never talk to you about taxes. The reason why the 1% are rising and the 99% are falling is that when you print money, 2 things happen: inflation and taxes. That's what crushes them, inflation and taxes. And any entrepreneur who thinks they're just going to save money to start a business and then make a lot of money is really deluding themselves. You know, that's not what real entrepreneurs do. In fact, most entrepreneurs, who number 28 million owning small businesses in America, are solo entrepreneurs. For 24 million of them, they're called non-salaried entrepreneurs. What happens is that people don't really understand what an entrepreneur does. Most people are therefore independent workers. But they are not really entrepreneurs. Independent workers are the ones who pay the most taxes, and nobody talks about it. We also talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, but what we're really talking about is that there's no bad economy. You know, you and I, we all have an external economy, but we also have an internal economy, and the goal is to change our internal economy. So for me, I can see the good in the bad, and I kinda don't care because I will be rich anyway. But a poor person with a personal and mediocre economy will only see a bad economy because they don't know how to make money regardless of the economy. And a middle-class person has a middle-class economy. What they want is a nice house, a steady salary, a job, and a car. Therefore, when you take away their job, it's a disaster. But But since an entrepreneur doesn't have a job anyway, it doesn't matter. What I tell people is what Bucky Fuller taught me, and that is, there's always a side. You know, you need to use the plural for at least two. So if you think the economy is bad, it's because your economy is bad. And if you think a stable job is important, you'll see an economy without jobs and protest for more jobs. So it's your economy versus the external economy. But the real entrepreneur focuses on themselves. If they fall, they say, okay, that's good because I will rise higher. You know, the average person will fall and say, I'm going to take Prozac. But a real entrepreneur, whether they fall or not, can always get back up. They can stand up and go higher because whatever happens to them, they become stronger, smarter, happier. But a person with a weak internal mindset is so scared of what will happen that it usually does happen. You know, people who are afraid of losing their jobs usually lose their jobs first. The entrepreneur's first job is therefore to control the inside, not the outside, because as soon as you cash your paycheck, you're an employee. You have to be stronger than that. It's about controlling the inside.